life will never be the same again. And just let go. Just let go. Rise together. We will rise together. Time is hanging by its final thread. And the skies are burning and bleeding red. Holding on to this beautiful pain. Teardrops fall like diamonds in the rain. But today, together we rise. Just let go. Just let rise together.
Hi everyone, Robbie here from Plant-Based News. We're really excited to introduce you to the director of an exciting new film, Dominion. Christoph Horst is the driving force behind the film Lucient, which was an incredible film that inspired many people, including myself. So Chris, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Before we start and talk about the film, I really want to just go a little bit into your past and your connections with animals. Could you talk us through like your very first memory you have with an animal and that kind of emotional bond that you had with an animal?
I suppose that would have to be the cat that I grew up with. For most of my childhood, she was there. She'd sleep on my bed with me every night, and really was very close to this cat, who sadly passed away. And honestly, I'm probably still not over it many years later. But yeah, that would have to be the first one that comes to mind.
And what's your background with animals? Did you grow up on a farm, or were you in the city? What was your relationship with them?
I just grew up in the suburbs, so I probably never met a farm animal until certainly after I went vegetarian. I was vegetarian for 9 years before I went vegan. And I think probably it was after I went vegan that I met a farm animal, sheep, pigs, cows, etc.
Often when we talk to non-vegans and we compare the lives of humans to the lives of animals, many people are outraged by the fact that through our kind of belief system, we believe that animals and humans are equal, that we're all earthlings, that we're all of value because we live and exist in this world together, not for each other, but with each other. And often when people ask, why should you care more about animals than humans? And in fact, actually, I care about all living beings, humans being animals as well. And people often forget that. And I think what's quite interesting is that when you ask a person, why is a human being more important than an animal, an insect, a bird, they sort of say things like, well, humans can write symphonies and humans can create paintings and build buildings. But they often forget about the incredible things that animals do in our world. And like, take the bees, for example. If you removed all the bees and even all the insects on this planet, the biosphere would collapse. So really, who is the most important creature on this planet? It's certainly not the humans.
Absolutely, yeah.
So why are you so passionate about animal rights? Like, what you've done a lot through your work and your daily life. You're clearly a very passionate person. Like, what drives you?
I suppose what drives me is the things that I've seen and my knowledge of the scale and just horrific nature of these industries. I know what's happening day in, day out across this country and around the world, and seeing, having seen just levels of suffering that most people don't even know exists or don't want to know exists. I think it's hard to forget that. It's hard to not want to do everything you can to try and fix that.
So you feel compelled, a sense of urgency based on your personal experience. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I can understand that. With so much suffering and abuse in this world, we, as you've said and witnessed yourself, how do we remain positive? How do we avoid becoming misanthropic and angry and introverted? Like, how do we keep moving forward?
I certainly have those days every now and then where I feel that way, but there's a lot to be positive for in this movement. Things are very different to how they were 5 years ago and definitely how they were 10 years ago. And I think 5 or 10 years from now, we'll be facing an entirely different landscape because things are happening. Veganism is getting into the mainstream. More and more people are finding out about these industries, and it's becoming easier for people to find out because these industries rely on secrecy. They rely on being hidden away. And those walls that they've put up are being broken down. And once that happens, it's inevitable that I think that those industries will crumble. So I'm very optimistic, and that's what keeps me going, I suppose.
That's great to hear. Now, this is a question about human beings, because obviously, we're the driving force behind most of the suffering on this planet, if not all of it. Do you think that we're born with compassion built into us, or do you think it's something that we have to learn as children?
I think I like to think that everyone starts out good, that there is good in everyone. And, there's that old saying, I forget exactly, but you give a carrot and a rabbit to a baby, they're going to eat the carrot and play with the rabbit, not the other way around. We're taught the opposite. We're taught to exploit and abuse those who we consider to be inferior. That's not something that comes naturally to us. It's essentially brainwashed into us from a very young age and reinforced again and again and again because that's the status quo. That's how most people are, and a lot of people haven't been made to challenge that idea.
We're conditioned, aren't we? Almost sort of programmed in a way to unlearn our compassion, especially young men, or especially men in general. I think we live in this society with a kind of toxic masculinity that pervades every part of our world, which I think is responsible for many of the problems that we face today. And there's a reason why 86% of vegans are women. I think men feel this sort of sense of, if they stop eating meat or if they care about animals, then society is going to view them as less than men, Right, so let's talk about your amazing films. First of all, Lucian, when I was creating our short documentary Swine, I used it as a kind of like an inspiration to for the storytelling that you employed, and I take my hat off to you because I think that film, out of all the films I've ever seen, was the one thing that completely like shook me from the inside out. Especially the one scene where you're walking down the long corridor and there's all the pigs in the dark, and it seems to go on and on and on, and it really epitomizes the kind of hell, the kind of. It's hard to put it into words, but that kind of like the helplessness and the hopelessness. What was it like making that first film?
It was actually very useful for me personally. I think useful for my mental health in a way, because I was getting all this material, seeing all these things. I needed an outlet for it. I needed something useful to put that towards, so that it wasn't just going around in my head. It could be something tangible that could actually hopefully make a difference and try and alleviate some of that suffering. So people often assume that it's a really difficult thing to sit there and put something like that together, but I kind of found the opposite, in that I found it relieving in a way to be able to put that towards good use
and share it with the world and say, I've witnessed this, witness it with me, so that together we can change it. Yeah,
absolutely.
I'm sure a lot of people who've seen that film have been driven to stand up and do something. It certainly has driven me in my activism. So thank you.
It's great to hear.
So the new film, I mean, talk us through the process of, obviously you created your first film, and then how did the idea for the second film come, Dominion? And obviously the name is very, very interesting, and obviously you've chosen that word specifically.
Yeah. Dominion is the film that I've wanted to make for maybe 10 years. I remember back in high school, thinking that this was something I wanted to do with my life, and at the time I had no idea, what a bolt gun was, what controlled atmosphere killing is, or all these industry terms that I now unfortunately know very well, quite familiar with. But I just had in my head that I wanted to do something like this, and I'm not sure if I'd actually seen Earthlings at the time, but certainly Earthlings was a powerful motivator, because I showed it to friends of mine who said, "Oh, well, that doesn't happen here in Australia. That's just overseas, or it's old footage or something like that." So I became compelled to fight that myth that it doesn't happen here, that things are somehow better here. And so I started that with Lucent, but Lucent was it had to happen in that I was getting all this footage specifically from pig farms, and not so much from other types of animal abuse industries. So I felt like Lucent was something I kind of had to get done and get out of the way, and then I could start focusing on this much more comprehensive view that doesn't just look at pig farms, but looks at our attitude towards animals in general.
And so, obviously, Dominion as a word, do you want to just talk a bit about the word dominion over animals as an idea?
I suppose the idea that it brings to my mind is this feeling of superiority that humans seem to feel they have, and that it somehow grants them dominion, grants them a right to treat those who they perceive as inferior however they please to their own ends. It's the same thing that allows racism. It's the same thing that allows sexism. It's people thinking that they're better for some arbitrary reason. So whether it's racism, sexism, or speciesism, I think it all kind of stems from this idea of treating inferior beings, perceived inferior beings, however you like. And so that's a notion that I wanted to challenge. Do we have any right to have this dominion over animals? No, I don't think that we do. I don't think that we are superior. And even if we were in some arbitrary ways, that still doesn't give us the right. Um, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, as far as like the film goes, we put the trailer out onto our channel, and not on our YouTube yet, but we put it out onto Facebook. The article went up literally as soon as you dropped it, and we've had like 15,000 shares of the article. Hundreds of comments, loads of people have written in. There's been several people who said that they're vegetarian and it's making them think about going vegan after just seeing the trailer, which is quite something. Now, just obviously the trailer itself it looks epic. Like there seems to be a lot of drone footage. With technology, do you feel like it's really going to revolutionize the whole sort of vegan activism type film industry, where we can get into unreachable places? What do you think about that?
Absolutely. Not long ago, it just wasn't possible to see how we can now, the scale of these industries, to see these giant buildings, these giant identical buildings laid out in rows, just smacked in some beautiful countryside, just completely out of place. It's just so valuable to be able to see the scale of it. It just gives a whole new perspective, and in general, the improvements in technology over the last few years, 4K quality, 4K resolution footage, we're able to see suffering in crystal clear quality, which isn't necessarily a good thing, but I think it removes any sense of doubt about the realism of what we're seeing. And I think being able to present something with good, almost good cinematography, just is a different way to get people interested in it, because so far a lot of the footage that's come out, it's very raw, it's very handheld, shaky camera, kind of almost low quality. So I think we're getting to a point where we can start showing with crystal clarity exactly what's happening, and remove any doubt.
It puts people in the story, it puts people in the situation, and it's a much more kind of visceral experience, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So making the film, let's talk about that. So you go into places and see things that everyday people wouldn't see. Obviously, a lot of the process is top secret. You wouldn't want to reveal how things are exposed, but I mean, what's took us through that experience? Have you personally? Obviously, I assume you must have a team or you work with other people. But what's it like, kind of going into these places and kind of trying to gather this content? Is it, how do you feel emotionally?
It's a difficult question, because when I started, I was very emotionally affected by it. It was tough to see these things, but these days it's almost like I've got to see something completely and utterly shocking to feel anything at all. And it's when that happens, it's almost a relief, because it tells you that you're still human, you still feel emotion. And sometimes you can sit there and watch hours and hours and hours of slaughterhouse footage and think, I'm not affected by this. What I'm seeing, objectively, I know it's horrible, but I'm not crying. It's not keeping me up at night. You do become numb to it, and I think when you realize that, it makes you question kind of what have you lost of yourself. And I think it kind of just numbs you to all emotion, really.
It's a bit like being in a soldier, isn't it? Like going into a sort of battleground, and you have a job to do, and in a way, and it sounds cold, but we can't sometimes afford the emotion, because as wonderful as it is to feel emotion and to be emotional beings, that the emotions can stop us from achieving our goals. And I feel, Dr. Melanie Joy, are you familiar with her work?
Yeah, I am.
She speaks of second-degree trauma, and that actually a lot of vegans or people who witness slaughterhouse footage and violence towards animals and other human beings slip into a state of second-degree trauma. where you become angry, misanthropic, introverted, kind of numb in many ways, and actually, it's quite damaging to the human psyche. But when it comes to sort of vegan activism or filmmaking, to sort of reveal these truths, I think it's not necessarily a bad thing to feel that numbness, because it's a protective mechanism. I feel
Absolutely.
like if we as people exposed ourselves to this footage over and over and over again, and we experienced internally this turmoil on a daily basis, I don't think there would be very many of us. We would probably, crumble on a regular basis. So I think it's natural, I think, to have to disconnect. Right. So coming to the end now, let's talk a little bit about grassroots activism. How can we become better activists, in your view?
By doing, I think, just get out there. Start small. If you're not confident about what you're able to do, I think a really effective method of grassroots activism that I've been seeing, it's been over a year now, Anonymous for the Voiceless. There's a group that started in Melbourne, the Cube of Truth, that's right, yeah. And it's now in, I think, over 150 cities around the world. And there's other organizations doing similar things. Just getting out to the streets with the footage, or whether you find you're able to actually have conversations with people stopping by who are interested. Mm-hmm. I think just putting yourself out there is a really, really important first step.
Amazing. How can we encourage people to care about animals when there's a lot of people out there, many people, who just don't care, who don't feel what we feel?
I don't like to believe that is the case, that people don't care. I think that the right approach hasn't happened for them, or they haven't been exposed to it enough. They've kind of learned to tune it out and not really think about it. And it may be one animal in particular that gets to them, or one story, or just something. And I think we just have to keep trying all sorts of different tactics, because everything we do will reach a different type of person. And I just like to believe in the inherent goodness of people. I mean, sure, there are some who will never be on our side, but I think most people just haven't been really made to question it, and they've put up all these barriers, and it's our job to one by one break those barriers down.
And lastly, how can people get in touch with you, support you? If you want to just tell us your website and your social media where people can connect with you, and also just mention when the film is going to be out too. Sure.
So Dominion, the film, is coming out in March 2018. It's just over, I think, 7 months from now. I've got a Facebook page, Aussie Farms, and a website, aussiefarms.org.au. So yeah, that's where all Dominion related info will be added.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate the time you've taken to chat with us. I know everyone's going to be very excited to see this film and share it and tell all their friends and family about it. The article, as I said earlier, has done really, really well, and we've had so much amazing feedback just from the trailer. So we can't wait to see what you've created.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks so much.